What's the best concert you've ever been to? For a concert lover such as myself, that's honestly a surprisingly difficult question to answer. I mean, I've been lucky enough to see some incredible artists over the years. So today I'm going to give you my 5 favorite concert experiences. But there's one catch. They're not ranked because there's no way I'm putting one of these above another. Each concert gave me something different. And then, of course, after I've given you my 5 favorite concert experiences, I am going to give you my dream concert. So, take a seat, turn the amp up to 11, and let's talk some music. Hey everybody, welcome back to Mostly Me, Occasionally Wise. I am Brian, and I am so glad you're here. Today we're talking about one of my favorite things in the world, live music. There's something different about listening to your favorite song through your headphones and then hearing that same song performed live in front of thousands of people. The lights go down, the crowd gets quiet, the band walks onto the stage, and then that first note hits. You get the goosebumps. You can just feel it. The electricity in that arena or outdoor venue, you can't just create it at home. And that's what I want to talk about today. I have been so fortunate and so blessed enough to see some incredible concerts over the years. But when I started to think about the 5 best concerts I've ever been to, I immediately realized I can't rank them. I really just can't, because how do you compare Hart and Joan Jett to Garth Brooks? How do you compare Chris Stapleton to Billy Joel and Stevie Nicks? You can't and you don't. So these are my 5 favorite concert experiences in no particular order. And I've got a few honorable mentions that absolutely deserve all the love. And then we're going to finish with something I've thought about for years, my dream concert. And unfortunately, this is one of those dream concerts that will never happen, sadly, but we'll get to that. So now, let's get into some Dad Life Debrief. So if you're new to Dad Life Debrief, it's an opportunity for you as a listener to join me throughout the week leading up to recording a podcast episode. You get to join me on my adventures of being a husband, father, family man, chaos coordinator, and everything in between. And I'm going to be real with you. Right now, I'm coming off being a little stressed. So I was fortunate enough during the COVID time to distract myself with building a PC. Now, granted, everything was, sky high as far as costs go, but it really helped with my struggle with anxiety and depression. So with having built this PC, when we adopted the boys, my 13-year-old, who is a gamer, really wanted to get into PC gaming. And right now he is on a Minecraft kick. And that's great. I love that he's found a game that he really enjoys. But with playing on PC and just about any game you play with on PC, you have the opportunity to download mods and skins and things like that for your game. And he does that with Minecraft. So this evening, I was getting ready to record my episode, and I always do kind of a mic check to adjust the settings on the microphone before I record, and I noticed my microphone was not recording. So I stopped it, and I kind of said in a low tone, and this is just a figure of speech. I would never bring harm to my 13-year-old son, but I mumbled, "I am fixing to kill this kid." Because I knew exactly what happened, because this is something that's happened before. What happens is there are times that he downloads things and he doesn't pay attention to what he's downloading. And when the pop-ups come up when you're installing something, sometimes it'll say, "Hey, does this app have control, permission to control, certain things on the PC?" And one of them was the microphone. Another thing that he doesn't do is he sometimes doesn't tell me, or he just forgets, which is fine because I'm just as forgetful as anybody. But I have told him time and time again, don't download anything unless you talk to me about it. That way, if something messes up, I can kind of navigate a little bit and fix it. But if you do it without me knowing and you mess something up, there's a small possibility that I may not be able to figure it out. And this was the case with the microphone. I couldn't get the microphone to just be recognized on my PC. So I went into his room and I took a deep breath because I'm tired. I didn't get a whole lot of sleep today. I didn't get a whole lot of sleep yesterday just because of life. And I asked him, did you download something? And of course, immediately that 13-year-old's like, that mentality kicks in and he's having to process like, okay, I have to think of a response because there could be trouble. And I followed up my question with, look, you're not going to be in trouble. I just need to know what you did so I know what to do to fix it. And of course, he denied everything, and it could be that he just didn't remember it, or it could have been that he was downloading a mod or some cosmetics and it asked for permission and he didn't pay attention. I get it. He's 13 years old. He was excited about a certain skin or whatever for his game. I was trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, but of course, when you're really tired, your fuse is not as strong and sturdy as it needs to be, and that was the case for me tonight. Of course, I walked out of there, and I was huffing and puffing. I was frustrated, and of course, Becca was like, "Hey, you kind of went in there a little aggressively." And I was like, "Yeah, I know, but I've told him time and time again, don't download things, don't jack up anything unless you know what you're doing, and I know what you're doing, because again, if something breaks, I can fix it." And she's like, "I know," and she's like, "Just be ready because you're gonna have to tell him time and time again. This isn't something that's just gonna be a one and done." And I get it, but of course, like any other human being, you get tired of repeating yourself. But with kids, you just kind of have to get used to it. But nonetheless, I did figure out the issue, and after about 20 minutes, so I'm kind of coming off that stressful high. My anxiety was high too, because what I did last time wasn't working. So I had to dig a little deeper on the Google. But fortunately, I was able to come up with a solution, and as you can tell, I'm able to bring you this podcast. So enough with that stress. Whew, boy. My wife and I went on a date this weekend. We went and saw Bryan Adams and Pat Benatar in concert. And that's our kind of music. We love the 80s and 90s. And don't get me wrong, we enjoy the new stuff, but it's just, growing up, that's the kind of stuff you heard, especially in my house, and I'm sure in Becca's house. You had all the soft rock and classic rock and things like that. And I mean, Bryan Adams is pretty popular. And so is Pat Benatar, and they've been featured in some movies. So kids that are a lot younger than me, if you're listening today, there are at least one or two songs you've heard from these people, and you're going to be like, "Oh, I heard this in this movie, or I've heard this in this game, or I've heard this on a YouTube short." They're not, artists that are just not everybody's heard of. It's Bryan Adams and Pat Benatar. That's all I've got to say. But it was great to go on a date with my wife. As parents, it's a struggle sometimes, and we are entering the busiest part of our year. We have the boys doing sports and, holidays and birthdays and things coming up and school starting. We are kicking off the busy season of life for us. And it was just nice to take a step back and enjoy the music that we loved together. And we had a blast. We came home tired. And it was funny because during the concert, 9:30 hit, and we're both yawning because usually that's the time we're going to bed. And so we had a good chuckle about that. And then, it was incredible just being at this concert and seeing these artists that are older than I am still have it, still running around on stage, being able to hit those high notes and things like that. And that's kind of what, prompted this episode, because it had me thinking, okay, man, and I think about this every time I go to a concert. I'm like, was this the best concert I've ever been to? And then I start comparing and contrasting, and it's kind of unfair because I have seen some concerts that you just can't compare. So with that said, let's have a quick word from our sponsor, and then let's talk music. So I guess my body is just going to allow my voice to crack. So I did say something to drink, so hopefully it doesn't crack again, but if my voice cracks, I apologize. Apparently at 42 years old, you can still hit puberty again. I don't know. But let's get into concert number one. This one was just absolutely incredible, and I think about it all the time. I'm talking about Heart with Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. Right away, this is a pretty ridiculous lineup. You've got Heart, a band with an incredible catalog of songs, and then you've got Joan Jett. And Joan Jett is one of those artists where you hear one guitar riff and you immediately know who it is. And seeing that kind of music performed live, it's different. It's incredible. I can't explain it. You can hear their songs 100 times through your speakers, but then when you're sitting there and you're listening to them play, you realize how powerful those songs really are. And I will say this, with Heart, I'm an emotional guy. I really am. And Ann, the lead singer, Ann Wilson, her voice is just, I don't know how to explain it, but one of my favorite Heart songs is Alone. And I love everything about that. The rhythm, the guitar, the beats, and then of course, Ann's voice. It's perfect, especially for that song. And when they started to do Alone live, it was cut down. It was acoustic. And of course, if you've ever seen or heard acoustic music live, it's just something special. So when she started doing Alone, and it was just acoustic with her sister Nancy Wilson playing the acoustic guitar, I got emotional. And at one point, my wife looks over at me and she grabs my hand and she notices I've got tears rolling down my face because it's just a beautiful song. And then hearing someone with the voice of Ann Wilson, it's just, man, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. But after the concert, my wife had a good laugh because she's like, you weren't the only grown man crying. There were several other grown men crying during that song. And for them, it may have meant something different, but for me, it was just, I'm in a moment where I'm hearing one of my favorite songs being played by one of my favorite bands, who I have wanted to see for years. They just never came close. And it finally happened. And then, of course, Joan Jett. I love Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. And to me, Joan Jett has always been one of those artists, especially women of rock, that has just been very underappreciated because the catalog that she has is just phenomenal. And of course, she does, I Want Rock and Roll, and she does Crimson and Clover. She does Do You Wanna Touch Me? And that's one of my favorite songs. It's a highly inappropriate song, but it's just one of those balls to the walls kind of rock anthems where you just like, when you hear it, the lyrics in the song aren't the greatest, but it's just the beat, the guitar, you have to crank it up. So with that said, this is the first one that came to mind when making this list, was just Heart and Joan Jett. Now let's talk about Garth Brooks, the king of country music, the GOAT. To me, anyways. Now, the king of country music is something that can get debated, but to me, it's Garth Brooks. If you've ever been to a Garth Brooks concert, you already know where I'm going with this. This man knows how to put on a show. I mean, seriously, there are concerts, but then there are Garth Brooks concerts. The energy is completely different. I mean, from the moment the shows start, the crowd is involved. People aren't sitting there quietly waiting for the next song. They're singing, they're dancing, they're screaming, they're holding their phones up. And then when one of his big songs starts, you can barely hear the artist because the entire crowd is singing along. And of course, that's just one of my favorite things about live music. When you're with 10,000 of your closest friends and you guys are all singing the lyrics, to one of your favorite songs that's being performed live. And with Garth Brooks, I've seen him twice. I saw him in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and then, of course, I saw him at Arrowhead Stadium. If I had to pick one of those, which one was my favorite, it had to have been Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City, Missouri. Like, that concert was just on a different level. It really, really was. And I'm going to say this, that man has got some indestructible hips and knees for as much as he was moving around on stage, because I have never seen a man that's older than I am still do it and just run around. I mean, the guy was running around like he was 20 years old. But man, you know, I haven't always been a big fan of country music. It grew on me, especially with Becca. Becca is a big lover of 90s. And of course, 90s country, Garth Brooks was he was front and center. So it took me a little while to warm up to it. And I had been to a couple of concerts before then, country-wise. I saw Keith Urban, and then we went and saw Russell Dickerson and Thomas Rhett. And then, it grew from there. And then, of course, Garth is just, man, it's hard to describe Garth Brooks as far as the level he is on when it comes to performing a concert. Because, Garth is one of those performers who knows how to connect with a crowd. And there's a reason people will go see him over and over again. He doesn't stand on stage and sing songs. He makes the audience feel like they're a part of something. And honestly, of course, with being there with Beck, the energy, the excitement, the feeling that everybody in that building was having the exact same experience I was. You could look around the arena and see people who had never met each other sing the same songs, laughing, dancing, having a great time. And that's what a concert should be. It really should. It should be an experience. And the GOAT, the greatest of all time, Garth Brooks, definitely knows how to deliver that. Now, going from Garth to my next concert is almost like going from one end of the musical spectrum to another. Because my next choice isn't necessarily going to be putting on the biggest show as far as lights, fireworks, and things like that. It's honestly about the voice. And when you hear this guy sing live, you will understand very quickly why his voice is so special. And I am talking about Chris Stapleton. Man, what a voice. I mean, there are singers, and then there are voices that make you stop and listen. And Chris Stapleton has one of those voices. You hear him on a recording and you think, man, this guy is a great singer. But then you hear him live and you realize, oh, that's different. And there's something about hearing a powerful voice in person that doesn't always translate through headphones. You can hear the grit, the emotion, the control, and the way he can take a song and make it feel completely different when he's performing it live. And to me, that's what stood out. It wasn't about needing the biggest stage. It wasn't about the most elaborate production. With Chris Stapleton, it was about the music. It was about the voice, the musicianship, the emotion behind the songs. And that's something I really appreciate about Chris Stapleton. You can tell he's there to perform, not to put on some fake persona, not to be something he's not. He's just an incredibly talented musician standing on a stage doing what he does. And sometimes that's all you need. You need, give me a great singer, give me a great band, give me a good song, turn the lights down, and I'm good. And that's a concert. So now we are going to go from that incredible country voice of Chris Stapleton to something that, when I think about it, always takes me back to my childhood. Because my next concert involved two bands that were a huge part of the soundtrack of my life growing up. And if you grew up in the 90s, there's a very good chance you know exactly, who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Collective Soul with the Goo Goo Dolls. I mean, come on. it's a great combination. It really is, and they mesh so well together. You run into that with some concerts. You there are times where you're like, man, the opening act and the closer, they just don't mesh well. Like their music's different or whatever. A really good description or a really good example of that was when I saw Machine Gun Kelly and Fall Out Boy. I just thought that was just such a weird combination. Don't get me wrong, Fall Out Boy was good. I don't really care for Machine Gun Kelly, but that's the best example I can get. But with Collective Soul and the Goo Goo Dolls, their music is on par with one another as far as the rhythm, what they sing about, things like that. And it's, with it being a great combination, it's funny because when you see concerts like that, you realize, you're getting older when the music you listen to is now being described as classic rock. And unfortunately, Collective Soul and Goo Goo Dolls fall in that spectrum now. But what was great about that is I've seen Collective Soul and Goo Goo Dolls a couple of times. Saw Collective Soul back at a smaller venue the first time, and I know just about everything from Collective Soul. My favorite album of theirs is Dosage, but, to me, they haven't put out a song that I don't know the lyrics to. And then with the Goo Goo Dolls, it's the same thing. Now, obviously, there are songs I love more than others, but when you get two bands that you know just about every, lyric for as far as songs, it's just a recipe for just an amazing time. And I got that with them. It was with the Goo Goo Dolls, excuse me. It's funny because we got to see them with Train. Becca and I did. Train was good too. Man, it's just talking about music. It's just, I love it. And of course, the more I'm talking about my favorite concerts, I think of other ones that I'm like, well, maybe I should have included this. But let's get back. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. With hearing Collective Soul and then hearing the Goo Goo Dolls, it's like something or someone opened up a time capsule. And that's why a lot of times with older artists, I enjoy these concerts so much because you get the experience, the music again, but you're also experiencing it as the person you are now. And, obviously you're not the same person you were when these songs came out. You lived, you changed, you got kids, you got responsibilities, you got bills, you got stories. But for a few hours, when you're seeing older artists like this, you go back. I mean, you're younger, you sing along, you dance. You're not worried about how your body's going to feel the next morning because you're doing moves you haven't done since you were 13 years old. But it's the memories that you're making with concerts like that. And you're also remembering what those songs meant to you. And honestly, that's pretty cool. So we've got 4 concerts down, and we've still got one more to go. And this next one, I'm going to be honest, it's a pretty incredible pairing. It's a once in a lifetime. It's a bucket list. I mean, all these concerts were bucket list, but when you truly think about a bucket list pairing as far as a concert goes, I mean, it doesn't get any better than this. And I'm talking about Billy Joel and Stevie Nicks. These two artists have catalogs that are impossible to ignore. And seeing them share a stage, that's something pretty special. And, man, we had to wait a couple of years. So we saw them in Dallas at Jerry's World, where the Cowboys play. And we had to wait a couple of years because when I had originally bought tickets for my daughter and I to go see them, COVID happened. So everything got postponed. And there was that fear that it was going to get canceled. But Billy Joel and Stevie Nicks, being the performers, that they were going to put this show on, even if it were going to be, even if it was going to be 10 years from the original date that they were supposed to perform. So, like I said, these two artists have songs that have been a part of people's lives for decades. They really have been. And when you see artists like that live, you realize just how many memories are attached to their music. I mean, Billy Joel, has this incredible ability to sit down at a piano, play a few notes, and suddenly the entire arena exactly knows what's coming. And everyone starts singing. And just talking about this, this is one of those concert moments that gives you chills. Because the artist honestly isn't even doing the work anymore. The audience is doing it with them. And then, of course, you've got Stevie Nicks. And there's just something about seeing Stevie Nicks perform live, the voice, the presence, the songs. There's a certain atmosphere that comes with her music. And putting the two together, a pretty special night. And, of course, getting to see it with my oldest daughter, because she tends to love a lot of the same music that I do. And getting to get these tickets for her and allowing this memory to be created. She still talks about it today. She loves Stevie Nicks. She loves Billy Joel, but at the time in her life, she was all about Stevie Nicks. And, like I said, it was a pretty special night. And, one of the things about this kind of concert that I love is that you don't necessarily have to be the biggest fan of every single song. You hear one that you forgot about, and suddenly you're singing along. That's honestly the power of a great catalog when it comes to a concert and the music artist involved. These songs have been around long enough that they've become a part of culture. You hear them and you know them. And being able to experience that music live, that's something I don't take for granted. So Billy Joel with Stevie Nicks absolutely belongs on this list. Now, I said I was going to give you 5, and I did. But there are 3 more that I absolutely cannot leave out, because if I did, I would probably hear something from my wife. I'd probably hear something from my 19-year-old. So let's give some love to these honorable mentions. Let's start with AC/DC. Because, it's AC/DC. And there's not really much more that needs to be said. You know exactly what you're going to get. You're going to get the guitar, drums, energy, and songs that make you want to turn the volume up when the volume is already completely maxed out. There's something about hearing AC/DC that, especially hearing them live, that just feels right. And you can't go to an AC/DC concert and sit quietly. You go to rock, and they deliver. So what's special about this concert is I got to see it with my brother and my best friend. My brother's my best friend too, but this was another bucket list concert. And the crazy thing about this is, and I know a lot of people are going to be like, why did you go? You could have gotten other people sick. And I may have, but at the time, I didn't care. It was AC/DC. I was going whether I was on life support or not. I had started to show symptoms of the flu right before the concert started, like a day or two. And I had it in my mind I was going. I was going to take some medication. I was going to stay hydrated. And I went. But that ended up being probably the worst bout of flu that I had ever gotten. And yes, it is attached to this concert. It is attached with that memory. But it's just one of those things, like when you have a concert like AC/DC that comes along that you may not get to see again because they're getting old. It's just, you have to go. It's almost like a requirement if you love concerts. So yeah, AC/DC was incredible. They delivered. There were a lot of big moments that I'll never forget. Of course, it also is tied with the fact that I had the worst bout of flu probably in my entire life. Next, we have Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers with Joe Walsh. Now, I'm not going to say a whole lot about Joe Walsh because a lot of people don't know him, especially if you're younger. But Joe Walsh is one of the founding members of the Eagles. But as much as I love him with the Eagles, I love a lot of his stuff when he was solo. Now, granted, it may have been alcohol and drug infused, but he's talented. Like, he's a really good guitarist, and getting to see him open up for Tom Petty was a special treat. Of course, I got to see him a few years later with the Eagles, but seeing him as a solo artist, I honestly prefer Joe Walsh more. as a solo artist because you get to hear and appreciate his catalog of music, as silly, as wonky, as outlandish as it is. But the guy is talented, so I have to give him his due. But I really want to focus on Tom Petty. Tom Petty is easily one of my top 5 greatest artists of all time. And that's just an opinion. I grew up listening to Tom Petty. He was a really big part of my life. I associated a lot with his music. Damn the Torpedoes, Full Moon Fever, probably my 2 favorite albums by him. But I had an emotional connection to a lot of his music, and he played everything. And it was so good. And it was one of those concerts that didn't have a whole lot of flash. It didn't have a lot of fireworks, things like that. It was just him playing his music and connecting with the audience, like I talked about earlier with Chris Stapleton. Unfortunately, I got to see him a few months before he passed away. And I didn't realize it at the time how much that was going to affect me, because when I caught wind of his death, I got emotional, because Tom Petty as an artist means a lot to me. And this should have been in my top 5, but again, it's really hard to do something like this because each concert it holds a special part, and a special place in my heart. And I'm trying not to get emotional, but yeah, Tom Petty was one that I was just so privileged to go see. My wife made it happen because we were broke at the time, and I was disappointed that I wasn't going to get to go see him, but she surprised me, sent me a text of the ticket she bought, and of course, one of many reasons that I love her, but she's not a big concert goer. She loves going, but it's not like something she just, has to do. And she knew when she married me that I loved going to see live music. And Tom Petty was just one of those artists I talked a lot about, as far as when I put my playlist together on Spotify, Tom Petty's always a part of it. And he's one of those artists to me that he doesn't have a song that I just don't appreciate or I don't resonate with. So, Tom Petty, man. I'm so blessed that I got to see him live, especially with the love of my life. But at the same time, as much as this was a happy experience, it's a very sad experience because, a few months later we lost him, and it affected music. It really did. So last on my honorable mentions list is a band that I wasn't sure I was going to enjoy. And I say that because growing up, my dad, I get my music taste from my dad, and he wasn't really big on music with a lot of brass instruments. And I'm sure some of you are like, brass instruments, like it's immediately clicked with you. And I'm talking about the band Chicago. And Chicago, to me is another one of those bands that has an incredible catalog. And I knew a lot of stuff from Chicago, and it wasn't up there on my list of things that I was just going out, out of my way to listen to or turn up when they were on the radio. And we caught wind that they were coming to our hometown, and Becca's mom and dad were going to be in town, and we wanted to do something special for them because they love Chicago. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be a good son-in-law and, take them to see Chicago. And it's like, I knew I was going to enjoy it, but I didn't realize how much I was going to love it. I can't remember the album. It was an anniversary of their album, of one of their biggest albums. And it's escaping me at the moment, but they did every song from that album. And then they took a break and they came back out and started playing all their big hits. And I fell in love with it. Like, since this concert, my wife and I have been trying to collect every Chicago vinyl. And Chicago is another example of why longevity matters, because when you've been making music for decades, you accumulate songs that people connect with at different points in their lives. You can go to a Chicago concert with someone who's 60 and with somebody who's 30, and there's probably going to be songs that both of you know. And that's what's crazy about Chicago, because when you think about the band Chicago, you're like, and you hear about the brass instruments and stuff that they play, you're like, okay, they probably don't have a whole lot of big hits, but they do. Like, I think they started in the 60s, I could be wrong. But during the 60s and 70s, and even in the 80s, like, Chicago dominated the music scene. And they've had a lot of key people come and go, Peter Cetera, just to name a big one. But yeah, this is one of those bands that they're fun to go and watch because of the talent they put on display. It's not easy to play trumpet. It's not easy to play trombone and French horn or whatever instrument that they're playing in Chicago nowadays. So this is one of those bands that if someone were to come to me and say, hey, I really want to go explore a new band that's still out on tour and doing their thing, who would you recommend? And Chicago honestly would be the first band that I would think of, because they're just so fun to watch. And they're one of those bands that you're going to be like, when they have such a huge collection of music, that there's going to be a song that you know. And so, yeah, definitely Chicago is on my honorable mentions. And if they come back around again, I honestly would love to go see them again. So, there you have it. AC/DC, Tom Petty, Chicago. Those are on the honorable mentions. Of course, as I say that statement, I kind of am second guessing myself, and maybe I should switch some things around. But that's the thing you run into with seeing great music and amazing artists live, is there's always that struggle, like, okay, who goes above who? So we're not going to do that in this episode, because this could be a very long episode if we did that. Now let's get to the one I've been waiting to talk about, my dream concert. If I could go back in time, if I could have bought one ticket to any show that just magically got created. And the thing about this is these are two bands that have never performed together. They have never toured together. So that alone is crazy to think about, because they were both thriving around the same time. And I am talking about Dire Straits with Tom Petty. Can you imagine that? Like, just think about it. Dire Straits walks onto the stage, the lights go down, you hear the guitar, and then Tom Petty comes out to join him for a song. And I can't even begin to think what the playlist would be, because a lot of that would happen. Because when you have two great artists like that together, they're gonna come out and play together. You can't have a concert without those magical moments. But as far as the set list, I have no idea what that would be. And honestly, I don't care. I just would be there, standing in the crowd thinking, like, is this really happening? Like, is this a dream? Like, this is real. And, those two artists being together just makes a whole lot of sense to me, because they do have a lot of similar playing styles and things like that. Dire Straits has that incredible guitar-driven sound. Tom Petty has that storytelling style. And both have music that feels timeless. I mean, imagine hearing Sultans of Swing live, and then hearing Tom Petty comes out during the magical guitar solo at the end of the song. And then imagine Tom Petty coming out and hearing Free Falling or Refugee, and then, Mark Knopfler comes out and joins him. I mean, come on, it's such an incredible show. I mean, like, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. And yes, I know it never happened, and it will never happen, but that's what makes it a dream concert. It's one of those combinations that exist entirely in my imagination. But if someone gave me a time machine and said, or some sort of magical machine that could create this concert, and they looked at me and said, hey, you get one concert, that's the one I'm putting together. Dire Straits, Tom Petty, one stage, one night, I'd be there. No hesitation, no questions asked. Talking about all the concerts has made me realize something. The best concerts aren't necessarily the one with the biggest stages. They're not the ones with the most expensive tickets. You know, they're not necessarily even the artist you listen to the most. The best concerts are the ones that become memories. You remember who you went with. You remember where you were sitting. You remember the first song. You remember the crowd. You remember that feeling. And then years later, a song comes on the radio and suddenly you go back there. You go back to that concert. That's the magic of live music. You don't hear a song, you remember a moment. And I've been lucky enough to have quite a few of those moments. Heart, Joan Jett, Garth Brooks, Chris Stapleton, Collective Soul, and the Goo Goo Dolls, Billy Joel, Stevie Nicks, and of course AC/DC, Tom Petty, and Chicago, just to name a few. I've been to a lot of concerts. And I don't know if I can pick one as my favorite. And honestly, I really don't want to, because each one gave me something different. And that, to me, is what makes live music so special. So I posted a couple of questions on TikTok. The best concert you've ever been to, and then, of course, I followed it up with the dream concert. If you could see one or two artists, who would it be and why? And I posted these questions on TikTok and Facebook, and you guys really showed up. And that means a lot to me, because some of these combinations are like, man, I'd probably go to that show too. So we're going to start off with the best concert you have ever been to. And some of these are really cool. So Georgia Ann Arthur on TikTok, she said Hozier 100%. Now, I've never seen Hozier, but my daughter has gone to see him. And she says that's probably one of the best concerts she's ever been to. And then, of course, Zombie Girl 92 said, she got to see Disturbed. And then, of course, she's seen Motionless in White and Ice Nine Kills. But, those are heavier bands. They produce a lot of heavy rock music. But I've seen Disturbed, so I can honestly relate there. Disturbed is fantastic live. I got to see them when they were doing the Music as a Weapon tour, and when they had first started, and then I got to see them again years later, and they were still just as good, if not better. And then Mag 163 says something, and this is a really cool response. They put sneaking out of speech class and debate tournament in Las Vegas to go see Alice Cooper. I've seen Alice Cooper. He opened for Motley Crue. You talk about someone that is a showman that can put on a show, and it's almost like a theatrical performance with Alice Cooper. That's what you get. So I can definitely resonate with this, because Alice Cooper was just fantastic live, and for as old as he is, he can still do it. And then, of course, Jamesy on TikTok said, Daft Punk, Radiohead. I am jealous of that, because I really love Daft Punk, but I really love Radiohead, and sadly, they've never come close. I don't even think they still tour anymore, but those are one of those. That's a dream band. That's a bucket list band I would really love to see. And of course, Daft Punk doesn't do their thing anymore, but Daft Punk is just incredible in general as far as music goes and in pop culture. They've done a lot of work in movies and, of course, with other artists. So now we're going to move on to the dream concerts. And some of these are just great. Like, these are some of the concerts that'd be like, man, if this ever happened, I would be down for that. So Mouse 894, you know who you are. You're my sister-in-law, Kristen. I love you. She said Ed Sheeran, Panic at the Disco, Pentatonic, Imagine Dragons, and Huntrix, I think is how it's pronounced. I don't know that band, but I would definitely go for that. It's such a wacky and odd combination of bands that I think it would just be magical. Now, I've seen some of these bands. I've seen Ed Sheeran. I saw him open for Taylor Swift when she was doing the Red Tour. And, of course, I went and saw Imagine Dragons with my 13-year-old son and my wife. Imagine Dragons is phenomenal. And they are a big family band, because we all love Imagine Dragons. And when they go back out on tour, if they come anywhere close, we're definitely going. My 19-year-old responded. She said, and this is why I love her, because I'm so proud of the fact that I have branched her music taste and I have a huge influence. She responded to the dream concert with Michael Jackson, Patti LaBelle, Jeff Buckley, and Whitney Houston. Like, that's just such a magical concert. It really, really is. And of course, I responded with, your dad is invited, right? And of course, I'd probably be one of the ones she'd go with. We've seen several concerts together, and we always have a great time. She was part of the Billy Joel, Stevie Nicks, but just imagine Michael Jackson, Patti LaBelle, Jeff Buckley, and Whitney Houston all in one night. Like, all the emotions you would feel. Like, you would be so worn out mentally, and your voice would be gone by the end of the night, but it would so be worth it. And let alone some of these dream concerts with the fact of how much the tickets would cost. But with our imagination and coming up with this, cost is not something we think about. Naomi Susan Vaknin on TikTok said Michael Jackson, Queen with Freddie Mercury, Backstreet Boys, Prince, Garth Brooks. And I'm going to assume that these aren't all on the same night, but if it all was in one night, it's such a diverse taste of music. It would be really cool to be a part of that. Of course, I responded with sign me up because I'd be down for that. And then Crystal responded, and I kind of picked up on what she was doing. She said Liam Payne, Niall Horan, Harry Styles, Zayn Malik. And of course, if you know who One Direction is, that's almost every member of One Direction. So it's like, this would be great. I would go see One Direction. I'm not above going and seeing a boy band. And then my wife, I asked Becca, like if you could put together any concert. And she has a great idea for a concert. The amount of money that would go into it, I don't think it would ever happen. But her idea was like a 90s, like, mesh of music. Like, you get NSYNC, Backstreet Boys, Destiny Child, all of those bands. And so many more. She's given me other examples, but I can't think of them right now. But, like, it was really fun to talk with her because that would just be such a nostalgia trip, especially for me and her, people who are close to our age, because you grew up with those artists. And again, that's another one of those concerts that you would be so mentally and physically drained, but it would be so worth it. When I asked on Facebook, I had my boy Marcus respond. Give me just a second. I'm sorry. I'm having to pull it up. My internet's being slow. When I asked about a dream concert, now it's not going to show it. Of course not. Come on, give it to me. All comments. My boy Marcus, I love you, man. He said Tool and Deftones. I've seen Deftones. They are really good live. But to pair them with Tool, I've always wanted to go see Tool. Great selection. And I would hope that if that were to ever happen, Marcus, that you would take me with you. So, of course, I still want to hear from you. Those that haven't responded, the question's still up there on Facebook. It's still on TikTok. What's the best concert you've ever been to? What would be your dream concert? And it doesn't necessarily have to be your favorite artist. I'm just want you to talk about something that would give you memories, something that would last a lifetime. Like I said before, you may not know everything from that artist, but just to be a part of that experience is, it's crazy. But, when it comes to your best, the best concert you've ever been to, when you think of it, was it maybe a massive stadium show? Maybe it was a tiny little venue show. Maybe it was an artist you grew up listening to. And then, of course, the same with, your dream concert. Who would it be and why? And you don't have to have an opening act. A lot of artists that I've mentioned, with the responses on social media, they could do a whole show themselves, and you would still be just as satisfied and, enjoy it. So, tell me all about it. Send me an email at mostlymecontact@gmail.com. And of course, don't forget to join the conversation on the Mostly Me, Occasionally Wise Facebook page. I'd love to hear your concert stories. I'd love to hear about your dream concerts, because who knows? Your comments may end up on an episode just like today. And of course, before we leave, I want to thank Opus Clips. Of course, if you're a podcaster, content creator, small business owner looking to turn long form videos into engaging social media clips in minutes, check out AI editing tool I use every week. I love Opus Clips. I post stuff all the time from them. My link will be in the podcast description episode below. And of course, it's over on Facebook, Mostly Me Occasionally Wise page. Using my affiliate link helps me support the show, and of course, it's no additional cost to you. So with that said, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Mostly Me Occasionally Wise. I hope this episode brought back memories for you like it did for me. When I get done with this, I'm probably going to go sit in the living room and reminisce with Becca. You know, maybe it reminded you of a concert you haven't thought about in years. You know, maybe it made you pull up an old song, or maybe, just maybe, it made you realize there's a concert you've been putting off going to. And if that's the case, go. Buy the tickets. I know they're expensive. Make it work. If you want to go bad enough and you put your mind to it, yes, that's some dad wisdom there. If you put your mind to it, you will achieve it. Take the trip. Bring someone you love. Stand in the crowd. Sing too loud. Dance badly. Make the memories, because eventually the lights are going to come back on. And the crowd's going to go home. The band's going to leave the stage. But that memory, you get to keep it free of charge. Well, not necessarily free of charge, because you had to pay for the ticket, but you know what I mean. Thanks for hanging out with me. And until next time, as always, stay mostly you, occasionally wise.